So you've spent months memorizing shapes, but your playing still feels lifeless and stiff. It's frustrating when your fingers move fast, but the music doesn't actually move anyone. So in this video, I'm going to reveal 3 scale breaker ideas that will finally fix your phrasing so that your guitar actually speaks instead of just reciting. Let's get into it. So scale breaker idea number 1 is the linear trap. The linear trap, as I call it, is when you only do scale runs in your solo. If the only thing that you're doing in your solo is just, then you falling in the linear trap. And this happens to a lot of guitar players. And the problem with this constant running up and down the scales is that it's predictable. Now, that's not to say that every scale run in every solo is predictable or emotionless. Far from it, a lot of amazing solos from metal and rock use a lot of scale runs. But the thing is that the scale run cannot be the only thing that happens in your solo. And when you do a scale run, ideally it'll be to cause a certain emotion. Maybe you're using it to ramp up the energy in a very climactic part of your solo. In that case, a scale run can be amazing. But if your guitar solo is just doing scale runs, then it can become very flat very quickly. So scales run can be used, but they should be used with intention and in very specific moments to achieve a specific outcome. Even guitar players who have been playing for years can fall victim to this trap. And this happens because practice trains fingers, but not necessarily your ears. Usually when we're practicing a scale, we're very used to practicing it linearly. So when you're soloing in the heat of the moment and you're relying on your muscle memory, it tends to default to that sort of linear movement, which when you're under pressure to perform on the spot can become the safest place to go to. And that's the thing about improvising and soloing on the spot, that you don't have time to think about where that note that you really liked for that chord progression is at that moment. So that's why it's so important to be aware of this linear trap. And this is what happens when the only thing that you're aware of is flat theory and just regular practice, which goes up and down the neck, instead of other composition and improvisation tools like motive and the things that those concepts are made of. So how can you identify if you are falling for this linear trap, as I call it? Here are some red flags that your solo is sounding like an exercise. You may have constant motion and no breathing room. If you're constantly just playing notes and there are no pauses in between those notes ever, then you fall in victim to the linear trap. If there's no clear direction that your solo is building towards, then you've definitely fallen victim. Great solos should have a beginning, a middle, and an end, just like a really great story. Ideally, you'll start with a specific beginning, right? Maybe you start off with low energy and you start developing it, and towards the end it might go into a climactic part in the solo where you really have to ramp up that energy. And maybe you'll have a fall off at the end and just sort of leave it off there where it is. Whatever the case may be, your solo should have a story, it should have dynamics, it should have a direction that it's building towards, which should be in line with what the rest of the band is doing at that time. So what are the pros actually doing instead? Well, they're using something I'm calling the color tone targeting system, because the pros don't really think in scales. They think, where do I want to go next? Or where do I want to land on next? Because the thing is that the chord tones are your anchor in all this. And the color tones are just the tones in a chord that define the color that a chord will have. You can take away every other note in the chord, but if you had the color tones, then you're good to go, and it's going to sound like the color of those chords that you're trying to describe. And the notes that are important in a chord that are considered the color tones are the third and the seventh. And for me, the best way to practice this is using the blues. Let's say you have a 16 bar blues in E. So if you take that blues progression, for example, the third in E dominant would be this G sharp over here, and the seventh would be the D note that we have over here. Now, if we take this concept and apply it to the rest of the chords in that blues progression, you'll notice that we can outline the entire blues progression just using those 2 color tones. So for example, that's really all you need. Those are the most important notes. So when you're improvising, instead of just doing the E minor pentatonic or blues scale, on top of all that, you can actually outline the notes themselves of those chords and you'll get way more powerful results. So for example, two, one, two. So that's what soloing using the chord tones can sound like in a blues progression. And as you heard, I didn't even need a backing track with me or a whole band accompanying me. You could completely hear the changes just by myself, just improvising using those chord tones. So that's the power of using chord tones in your soloing. That's why they're so important. You could take away the rest of the band, but if you have the chord tones with you, then you don't even need a band with you. And color tones are amazing for this, but you can also target other notes that are part of a chord. The important thing here is that you're working with intention. You're targeting specific notes and you're trying to get a specific color. You're not just throwing your hands wherever on the fretboard and landing wherever and just trying to get lucky. And really important here, try to land on those strong beats when you're targeting these color tones. Hopefully you heard it when I was improvising on the blues changes, but whenever there was a strong beat, I would try to land on one of those chord tones. That really establishes the sound that you're targeting, so it makes everything feel way more intentional. And what we're really doing here is playing the changes, as they call it. Learning to see the chord tones in a visual way really helps with this, and that's why it's so important to be able to see on a visual level. And no matter what inversion or position I'm doing, I know what the thirds and sevenths are, and even what the extensions are and where they are in every shape that I'm doing on the neck. So I'm not trying to mentally and manually calculate what chord tone is where every time that I'm playing anything anywhere, but I'm visually aware of where they are just on a like position level, if that makes any sense. So if I'm playing E dominant here, I know this is the third. I know I have another third here, a seventh here, I have the ninth here, and that's what we're trying to work towards when we're using the case system to see the neck. It's not just seeing the neck and knowing where you are, it's seeing everything through that and knowing that in a certain position you have chord tones in a specific place. I'm going to give you a real cool exercise for this that really helped me to be able to see these things, and that's basically trying to outline the thirds and sevenths in each chord in a certain chord progression. And a really great way to start this is like I was doing the blues progression, because you only have 3 chords to work out this thirds and seventh exercise. Let's say a blues progression in B flat. Well, that'll be this right here. So you have your third and your seventh over here. So a trick here is that if you're doing the first chord progression, third seventh is going to be here, a tritone, right? Then the next chord is just going to be a tritone half a step down. And then we go back up half a tone up for the original chord. And then semitone down. Then again, semitone up. And then for that third chord, we're going to go half a step up. And then we're going to go a full step down or 2 frets down to the tritone of the second chord. And then half a step up to go back to the original chord's tritone. And the same thing applies in any octave. So try to take a song that you like and play only the thirds and sevenths in each chord. And another important thing here is that you're going to want to keep those thirds and sevenths close to each other. And it doesn't apply for every song and every chord progression, but you're going to want to try to get as close to that as possible. Because eventually these thirds and fourths that you'll be practicing will become your landing zones when you're soloing. And once you have that down, your solos will instantly start to sound way more musical and intentional. Now, even if you hit the right notes, your solos can still sound kind of boring. And this is where most players get stuck. They might sound in line with the harmony, but maybe their solos still kind of sound like academic or something. And I'm going to give you one really great trick which an amazing guitar player called Wes Montgomery employed in a lot of his solos. So I'm going to be calling this the Wes Montgomery trick. And what I really love about this trick is that it basically prioritizes rhythm over notes, because rhythm at the end of the day is one of the most powerful ways to instill musicality into anything that you do. So the Wes Montgomery trick is basically a way of thinking about how you're developing your solo. So if you look at a lot of Wes Montgomery's solos, he would usually start off pretty linearly using single note runs and all that sort of stuff. But towards the middle of the solo, he will switch toward using more rhythmic octave runs. So for example, maybe if he's playing an F major, he will go. Maybe he do some sort of run over there, but maybe towards the end of the solo, he would just start doing. And you can incorporate this same technique into your solos. Start your solos off linearly and then end them rhythmically. Because the cool thing about this is that in the beginning of the solo, you'll be playing a bit more linearly, but when you're using octaves in a more rhythmic way, like I tried to demonstrate earlier, that forces you to think in a more motivic way. In other words, using motives to your advantage. So you stop playing new ideas every second and you take the idea that you do have and sort of expand it and explore it in a lot of different ways. Because if you're playing octaves on the guitar, you can't play every note ever. It's very uncomfortable. And it's a great trick because it naturally leans into this idea of tension and release. And it helps you build a solo. It feels climactic in and of itself because you're changing up the formula as you go along and you're developing it in a very natural way, adding more notes into the mix but playing more with the rhythm and playing a bit more harmonically even. And if you want to practice this idea of using motives in your solo, try to develop one motive for a song that you're practicing and kind of playing that same motive all over the song, just adapting it. And it's not that every solo is going to be built like that, but it's a great way of getting your brain to start thinking more in motives instead of scales. So try to practice that whenever you can. And I feel that's going to give you a really great advantage and make your solo sound just way more musical. I know it helped me a bunch when I was in college. And remember that the idea of tension and release can be both melodic and rhythmic. So you can create melodic and harmonic tension by playing different tensions related to the chord. So if you're doing a dominant like A dominant, there I created like harmonic tension because I played some very dissonant extensions over there, right? With the melodic harmonic scale. And then I resolved it to a chord tone, to the fifth in this case of D minor. But it can also be rhythmic. So instead of playing just, if we're doing like a common rhythm to use over that would be maybe something like. But if you want to spice it up, you can use different rhythms inside of that rhythm, if that makes any sense. So you can go like. Like I was doing right there, playing 3/4 and like on top of 4/4. So really the best thing you can do for yourself, I guess, is study some Wes Montgomery, because you'll see all these techniques executed so perfectly in his improvisations and solo. I think it's going to really help you level up on guitar. But let's wrap things up. At the end of the day, the problem is not that you're using scales. It's that you've been taught to stop there, because scales don't make music. Your musical decisions do. The notes you target, the rhythms that you choose, the feel and what you want your audience to feel when you solo, and how that shapes a phrase over time. That's what turns a solo into something that people actually feel, something that people are impacted by. So if your playing has been stuck sounding like exercises, stop thinking in shapes and start thinking about your solo's emotional intention. And if you would like help to build the foundations to actually be able to apply this on the fretboard without thinking about where you are on the fretboard, I put together a free guide called 3 Steps to Fretboard Mastery that shows you exactly how to see all this on the neck and how to connect it like a pro. This is the real foundation to an incredible solo, and it's yours now for free. So if that interests you, you can download it at the link in the description down below. And until next time, keep practicing.